Hello.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Assembly work session on first quarter budget revisions for the year 2017. I'd like to start with introductions, and we'll start with Lance Clark.
Rose Coley, Assembly Budget Analyst.
Lance Wilbur, O&B Director.
Robert Harris, CFO. Patrick Floyd.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Ellie Braidman.
Dick Crane.
Felix Rivera.
Tim Steele. Eric Croft.
Bill Evans. John Middleton.
Pete Peterson.
Julia Tucker, Assembly Council.
In the audience, please.
Jessica Kim, Assembly on behalf of Warren Network.
Lane Saban.
Owen Brass, Deputy Chief of Staff.
Bill Baltini, Municipal Attorney. Rick Judy, Director of Office of Economic Community Development.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wilbur, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a half hour today, and the purpose of today's work session is to give the Assembly an overview of these, basically the changes that the administration is proposing as part of its 2017 budget. And in this presentation, Madam Chair, for the benefit of a couple of new Assembly members, I put some slides in here just to remind us all how we built 2017, and then I'll talk about the changes that we're proposing in 2017 as part of a revised budget. For the new Assembly members, we adopt a budget in November of every year, and then this time of every year when we get revisions to finances or any unknown surprises or something, things we didn't know about when we approved the budget, this is an opportunity for us to make those adjustments, and that's what this is about. It's also the time in which, after the school budget has been approved and approval of this, we set the mill levy, so I'll talk a little bit about that as well. Before I get going, I know the mayor is at another event, and he plans to be here before this meeting closes, so I think we'll have an opportunity to hear from him as well. For the Assembly members and the new Assembly members, welcome. To remind us sort of how we built 2017 as it relates to some of the challenges that we had. Many of you recall this information here as it relates to some of the state challenges that we had, primarily as they relate to revenue. And when we built 2017, we really had some fiscal challenges that relate to some funds that we had previously that we were not afforded to as part of the development of 2017. Likewise, on the municipality side.
Do you mind, can you just go back on that?
Sure.
Is that green arrow meant to be?
More cost to us.
But the green above wasn't, that was an actual,
You're right.
so, and I can't make your numbers add up quite. I get 6.5 plus 7.5 is 14. It wasn't one
So I
went the
was-
other way?
Probably rounding.
Well, it seemed like it added and one went the other way, so 14, did 14 plus 1.4 instead of 14 minus 1.4?
The challenge of this, thank you, Mr. Croft. The reason that we put this one on this slide is actually public safety. They, as it relates to prisoner care, they actually, in the top ones, it was money that we were receiving from the state that we no longer get. On that one, it was a cost that was given to us, so it was a cost that we had. So the total net to the municipality wasn't going to come up with 15.
Okay, so the 15.4 is right, just the numbers, the arrows were a little confusing. Thank you for that.
You're welcome, Mr. Croft.
Excellent question. Thank you, Mr.
And
Chairman.
the point I presume is that we've already incorporated this into our.
Yes, you're exactly right.
Thank you.
So these are things that we incorporated when we built 2017, not things we're dealing with in the first quarter. Similarly, when we built 2017, we knew we had some SAP costs that we were going to have to manage. We had some increasing health care. We needed to be approved contracts in our labor. We had a commitment to retirement, police and fire retirement. Again, for the new Assembly members, this is all information we had when we built 2017 that has been approved. Again, the administration's commitment to public safety when we built 2017, this is the information that this is the amount of money that we had. All of these academies are still on track. And then, as you recall, and we also made some reductions all across many departments. We made some reductions in fuel and our fleet to the net savings of about 7.4. And the combination of all of those slides helped us get to a balanced budget. So what I wanted to start off with when we talked about our 2000 and when we do a first quarter revision, Again, we make adjustments that refine anything that we have to do. If we're going to have to make any adjustments to true up our fund balance, make sure that our reserves are a solid place so that we maintain our positive bond rating. Revenue adjustments, I'll talk about those. We have some expenditures, the recently approved, voter-approved bonds. We include those in here. We had some recent settlements. Aklugna is probably the primary one there. We had some workman's comp and liability. We had some other changes as it relates. And then when we do this, we also include all of the service area adjustments that come in after the budget's approved. If a service area or board reaches out to us and they want to make a modification to their mill rate, we include that, and you'll see that in the approved document as well. So maybe to summarize, sort of looking back in the last 4 years, or 3, and then the one that's proposed, these are the approved additions to the first, as a part of the first quarter adjustment, and then 2017, the amount of proposed increase in direct cost of government will be about $5 million. I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So this slide here, I'm going to let Robert talk about each one of these, but again, I mentioned some of the detail. We really look to the CFO, the treasurer, public finance to really make sure and scrub how our revenue projections are going and everything that we have built in, and if there's any significant modifications for consideration, and we've kind of broken them down in 2 separate areas here, so I'll let Robert go ahead and speak to some of these.
Sure, thank you, Lance. So just jumping right to the bottom line, we expect to have a total of about $600,000 of additional revenue coming in this year, and breaking out where we see increases and decreases. And I would just sort of point out for new assembly members that $5 million is roughly 1% of our budget, so $600,000 is roughly 1% of our budget. But going up through the categories of revenue increases, we're looking for about an extra $1 million in delinquent criminal fine collections. We're going to step up our efforts to be able to pursue and find folks who owe us money. It hadn't been included, but when we constructed Fire Station number 9, we're going to end up selling that property. That'll be money that comes back into the municipality. We've looked at investment earnings, both from TANs and from our investments. And TANs are the tax anticipation notes that we just sold last week. They're a short-term borrowing. I think the all-in cost is about 1.03% for our TANs notes. We'll pay those off by September. We do receive money coming back from the Build America bond subsidy. That was money we had borrowed back, I think around the 2008, 9, 10 time frame. We're still receiving money from that. We expect to see a slight increase in ambulance fees, some money from fees, some slight increases in payment in lieu of taxes. There was an adjustment to traffic reimbursement from the state of Alaska. And aquatics, the line there is, it represents an increase in fees for using municipal pool facilities. We expect to see some decreases though. We expect to see a $1.9 million decrease in the MUSA-NISA from, this is principally Plant 2A. We had, how we had done the original calculation, turns out we hadn't quite got that right. So that's offset by about $1.9 million. And was there one other solid waste services I think was also in there for a smaller piece of that. We expect to see some reductions from department revenues from decreasing the amount we collect from in-town. Some of the contracts, we're going to see some increases in lease and space rentals. Decreases in lease and space rentals. We'll receive a little less money in motor vehicle registration and rental. Also, slight adjustments for delinquent taxes, incarceration costs, recovery, MOA assistance, again, tobacco, and Sullivan Arena. That is principally due to the ACEs no longer using that facility on a regular basis. We received a small portion of their ticket sales. So all in all, we're looking at about $3.8 million of increases, offset by $3.2 million in decreases, giving us roughly a $600,000 total adjustment of what we expect in terms of revenues for 2017.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that Ms. Stefosky has joined us online. Ms. Stefosky? She's there. She's there.
I'm here. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions. One, Mr. Harris, thank you for the summary. I was going through my packet for our meeting and noticed the collections were down substantially versus projection for 2016. What is our basis for presuming an increase in 2017, given that I think we're likely going to see a similar scenario related to specifically PFD reductions, given that's the primary source for collections?
Thank you, through the chair, Mr. Flynn. So, in large measure, I think we plan to be far more aggressive in terms of our collection efforts. There's certainly a portion of our revenues that are brought to us from garnishments that we receive from PFD, and we see a decrease in the PFD. Last year, it went from $2,000 down to $1,022. We have kept the estimated PFD amount to be $1,022. I know there's some discussions in the legislature about alternative numbers. But we kept it at 1,022, and we do see an increase. That's good for our garnishment pieces. But we do have a fair amount of money that is outstanding to the municipality that we think if we're more aggressive in terms of pursuing collections, that we'll see a bump in that. And, you know, in the past, I know there have been efforts to basically scofflaw type things where, letting people know that they haven't paid and we expect them to pay. We think we have some means of doing that.
Can you put a little more detail? Because this is exactly where we get phone calls, emails saying, how come the city's coming after me on X, Y, and Z? I thought I already resolved this, et cetera. Can you provide a little more detail? That's $1 million, but not an insignificant number.
Right. Well, I think, and Lance, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our total outstanding balance due from folks is about $24 to $26 million. So we're looking for about a 5% increase in our collections effort out of that pool of money that is owed to us. And I think if we, in the past, I know that the municipality and the police department had things, they had things on their website saying these people haven't paid. Perhaps that was what generated some phone calls. We would certainly not be doing something with the intent of generating phone calls for assembly members. But, our effort, I think, would be to highlight to people the opportunity to pay and to resolve past due debt.
And just one more, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. On the investment earning, TANs in particular, we've underperformed the past couple of years, not through any fault of municipal officials, just because the market's been so soft. What's our degree of confidence in achieving that level of revenue return on the TANs?
Well, the TANs, so this is investments and TANs.
Yeah.
TANs will be a narrower slice of that 772 number.
Yeah, and we should probably explain more thoroughly to Ms. LaFrance and Mr. Rivera how that works. But roughly, we borrow money about now based on the expectation that we're going to collect property tax dollars later in the year. And because we're a municipality, we can borrow that money as tax exempt bonds, but sell in the market at a higher rate, and the differential, which is very closely prescribed by the IRS, provides us with a small revenue stream. It's been better in past years than it's even reflected here, even if it was all of the 772, but it's not. It's part of that. So that's one of the ways that we manage our money effectively. So, Mr. Harrison, I apologize for the preface, but if you could explain to us the level of confidence that we'll achieve the returns on TANs that we're hoping for.
Thank you, through the chair, Mr. Flynn. So this is the part of a presentation where somebody in the investment finance professional world would say that all of my statements have could be up and could be down, but so the TANs, just to kind of highlight the breakout, and thank you for the preface, because we did, as I mentioned last week, we closed our TANs transaction. We will collect the money in June, July period, and then August, September period. We'll pay off those TANs notes in September. We borrow at an incredibly low rate. I think our all-in cost, including the fees and so forth for TANs, is about 1.08%, I think is the number. So we're able to take that money and hold on to it for a certain period of time. We make a little bit of money on that. I think we're reasonably confident. That's about 230,000 of the 772. The other, the 535,000, is in the investment pool. We, for the benefit of new members that would be joining the assembly, we have a fairly conservative investment philosophy. We are investing first for stability and security, liquidity. Somewhere down the range is return, and in fact, that's probably in terms of the order of hierarchy. The things we're looking for is making sure that we don't ever we eliminate opportunities for us to lose money that we would then have to go back and replenish on behalf of taxpayers. So we have a very conservative investment philosophy. We think there's a reasonably good chance that the number, the 535, which is we're sort of anticipating is an increase in the investment earnings, that'll come through. Again, going back to my opening statement, the last 4 to 5 months in the marketplace, for those of you who follow the market, have been I don't know if I would use. They've been kind of, yes. Will it change over the next 4 to 6 months? I think there's a reasonable chance that market performance will change, and we are hoping to reach that number. So I am confident we're going to give our best effort to reach that number. The nice thing is, of course, as your administration, we have other levers to reach a balanced budget, and that if those investment earnings don't materialize, we have ways of reducing some of our expenses.
One final point of that. And I put my pack in my car early because I was got here early by accident. Are we not down 2.3 in unrealized losses at this point on investments?
I'd have to, thank you to the chair. So I'd have to go back and look whether that 2.3 is from, that's our
That's
MOH
16.
pool, right? That's the category. That's right, the MOH trust. I'll have to go back and look. If it's an unrealized loss, if we're not actually having to liquidate that asset, that holding,
I recognize
you can write that through.
I know the difference between unrealized and realized, but that's why I asked the question about confidence in this number, because I reviewed that and thought that's a big swing.
Yeah.
We're talking about here. So sorry for you to keep sticking around.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Welcome, Mr. Mayor, welcome, Mr. Abbott, Mr. Evans.
And you think Patrick was going to be around to vote on this? Actually, the conversation there answered my question.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually got an email from people who use the Bartlett High Pool last night, and they're panicking about the increase of the pool.
So let me clarify. What we did here on this one right here, we're not increasing the fees. What we did is we looked back at what we budgeted for the amount of revenue that was received at the current rate of the pool fees, and then we adjusted them based on the actuals at the end of 2016. And so what we budgeted was actually $100,000 less than what their actuals were, and they had a little bit more wiggle room in there. So we made this change based on their actuals for 16, assuming that the actuals for 16 could be realized for 17. We're not modifying the fees, it's just the amount of fees we're collecting based on the amount of revenues we're collecting on the current fees.
So they were mistaking in thinking that their fees were going to be increased dramatically?
Mr. Peterson, if they are, I'm not aware, but I can find out for you. I can find out.
One more
Certainly,
item.
Mr. Peterson.
We settled one lawsuit, we lost another one, and so I thought we were going to pay including the $5 million out of fund balance. Is that already taken care of?
That's about ready to come up. Yes, we did. And we're going to have to, and part of this budget is taking into account that settlement. So,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Trainee.
On the Sylvan Arena, isn't that a little over optimistic on the amount of reduction we're going to see there?
So what this is the contract that we have this year, we actually have an agreement that based on their revenues and their expenses, the contract that we have allows us for a delta that if they don't meet their revenue projections, the contract requires us to make up part of those costs. So Mr. Schudy's here, he could answer it with a little more detail, or I could get back to you. But
Get back to
basically, we have a
Mr. Schuster,
contract
what
with
we've
them.
got to make sure they're trying to market the Sullivan, the
Right.
realistic rates, given the fact that the professional hockey team's pulling out. Because I've heard of other people that say they can't afford to go to the Sullivan because of the high cost, so we need to reduce the cost down and make sure we've got that place rocking the
And
whole
it-
time.
and the reason this one is here is proposed is due to a contractual obligation we have with the management of Sullivan Arena.
I'll talk to them after this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainer. Anything else, Mr. Harris?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Mr. Wilbur, you have.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So, on the 2017, in a previous slide, I showed you that the amount of additions to the direct cost budget would be about $5 million. And this slide here presented them in sort of two different categories. Those additions that the voters have approved, whether we have a legal obligation or a contractual obligation to meet those things. These are things that we did not know about when we built the 2017 budget. So these are things that are new since the end of the year. And then there's a couple on the bottom which the administration is proposing for consideration of the Assembly, and I'll talk about each one of these. So the voter-approved bond and O&M, that's $1.4 million. This is really a reflection of the 2017 bonds that were just recently approved. The O&M amount of cost and those things go into our direct cost budget. Medical costs, we had an increase in as it relates to the municipal contribution to medical cost to employees to about $1.2 million, which is primarily in police and fire. The police and fire medical trust contribution, when we set the budget last October, it was based on the cost of medical health, medical benefits, and the number of participants. After the first of the year, that number gets recalculated. The health costs obviously go up. The number of participants were adjusted. That gets us to an additional requirement of about $1 million. Litigation, and speaking with APD and our folks in the legal department, we do anticipate, we are in litigation. These are costs that we know are going to be coming in right now. The budget that we put in is not adequate, and so we're requesting we add a little bit more in there. The utility costs, when we modify the utility rates, the municipality does pay its light bills, so and gas and other utilities, so there's an additional increase in there. Contracts, lease payments. The lease payments, some of this is with a little bit with real estate, but we also have a contract with the museum and the PAC, and so we have an obligation as an increase that's about 100,000 to that 160. In IT, when you see this, when you see the AM support, you're going to see some pluses and minuses. It's going to be pluses and minuses as it relates to SAP and Exec Enterprise. The net is an additional $35,000, so that's about $4.7 million. And the administration is proposing to put $300,000 in contractual services for a stormwater utility, get that ball rolling. And that during the 2017 approved budget, there was some discussion among the Assembly members following the approval of the budget, asking Mayor Berkowitz and his administration to really take a select number of departments, probably 2 big ones and 2 little ones, and do a deep dive, similar to what the state does. So this is an estimate to use some consultant services to help with that. I mentioned this to the Budget Advisory Commission earlier this week. They're also very excited about this opportunity. And then we have some miscellaneous adjustments, pluses and minuses. They're very small. The total net is rounded to $5 million. So when you see the 1Q, there'll be a lot more detail about the things that Robert mentioned as it relates to revenues, and these are the proposed amendments that we would be adding into. So, are there any questions on
Mr.
these?
Trainee?
As we get into litigation on here, so I'd like to ask legal to give us an executive session on litigation for our new members. Look at having that, not that we change new members, but the next meeting after that. Because there's significant legal things facing us. I want the new members to know what we're dealing with. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Any other questions? Please continue,
Madam
Mr.
Chair.
Wilbur.
So on slide 9, the 2017 approved budget, total direct was $504 million. The 2017 1Q adjustment would bring to 278. As Mr. Peterson alluded to, we do have to include that one-time expense for the settlements for equipment. We have, we also have a little bit for workers' comp and GL, which adds another 6.8 million into that for a total of about 285. That's a commitment that we and the Assembly approved those legal settlements, so we adjust our budget and ultimately our mill levy to make sure that these commitments are completed. So the next slide is a preliminary estimate on our average mill levy for 2017. OMB is still refining the numbers, but I think we're pretty close here. So in 2016, this time of the year, the average mill levy, including the municipality of Anchorage and the school district, was 14.62. The preliminary estimate for the new mill levy would be 15.43, which is under the average of the last 20 years. Still, that's been historical for the last few years. But I want to break down sort of the municipality's mill levy in part, 0.62. Of that 0.62 mills that will be an increase, about 25% of it is strictly to meet that requirement for those two litigations. About half of it is related to half of the total amount of 0.81 mills is related to voter-approved legal obligations, contractual things, and things that we built into the approved budget. The minor adds that we've considered in 2017 in this 1Q are very, very small, so I just want to let you know that, I mean, for illustration purposes, I just put less than $1 in there because it's very, very small. The school district is part of this. They are 25% of the total amount of mill levy. So the aggregation of the settlements, the voter approved, the things that we've added in 2017, and the school district is about $81 per 100,000 assessed value to include all of those things. And obviously, if the settlements weren't part of our budget, the number would be 60. So it would be down by a third. So there's preliminary levy numbers. When we present this to you, we'll be working on refining those as well. Any questions on that sheet?
Doesn't look like it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one of the things that we will also include, in addition to the general government budget, we are going to have to make some adjustments to the utilities. As Mr. Harris mentioned, we had some modifications in use of NISA, both for MLP and for solid waste. We have to reflect those changes in the budget, and that will be a very small, sort of a true up to make sure that that matches the two. So our schedule, today I really appreciate the time, even though it's been brief, to give you sort of a highlight of the presentation. Our plan is to provide the assembly documents, the resolutions, and the AM support that will detail all of the changes that we talked today on Tuesday the 11th. I understand the Public Budget and Finance Committee is still scheduled to meet next week. We expect this may be a topic of discussion.
Well, if I may, we weren't scheduled to meet next
Oh.
week, but we can be scheduled to meet.
It's up to you. I thought on my calendar, so if you are going to, it's up to the assembly.
We'll talk about it.
Thank you.
We'll let you know. Thank you.
I'm told that there's a work session on the 21st, a second work session on the 21st, and then 25th would be when you'd be scheduled to have your public hearing and approve it. And then Treasury will then, following your approval, the mill rate will be set. We'll send that to Treasury and they start putting up our notices. So that is a very brief summary of some of the points that we've been working at. And I know, I don't know if the mayor wants to make some final closing comments. Still here.
Welcome, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the new numbers but the old numbers going on. I don't know if that's a full title, but not someone
Retiring.
but not shy. I just want to make a comment about this budget. I think what you're seeing here is some structural changes that are existing in the way the state and local governments interact, and we're starting to see that the state's